to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our last Selectmen meeting of the calendar year. I'll open tonight's meeting and ask if there is any public comment from the board this evening.
There is. I have a statement I want to make. Since it's the last televised meeting of the year, the last televised meeting before we will have our special town meeting and the ballot to discuss and vote on, hopefully approving the middle school, high school project. And just want to remind folks, we have a huge opportunity in front of us to replace two older, tired, inefficient, expensive to operate, poorly laid out, yet well-used facilities with one that is state-of-the-art, efficient, and cost-effective with a 50-plus year life. This process started back in 2005, 8 years ago, as we attempted to be ready for the inception of the MSBA program after a multi-year hiatus by the state in funding school buildings. We were delayed as the DESC and MSBA forced us into two regionalization studies as we deferred capital repairs at the schools until we knew our direction. We have worked closely with and under the restrictions of the MSBA. We are the junior partner, decidedly, and some restrictions and processes have felt overbearing and excessive at times, but the result is a well-thought-out solution with no room to cut corners, countered with the demand that we stay within a limited budget. $36 million of our state tax money can be spent in Lunenburg. There's no slight to our neighbors in Ayer, Shirley, Groton, Dunstable, Ashby, Townsend, Pepperell, and Leominster, to name a few, who have been getting our state tax dollars, but it would be nice to see some actually come home to Lunenburg. And just so we're clear, we have one shot if we want to bring that $36 million here to Lunenburg. The MSBA has concluded that this solution is the most acceptable and most fiscally sound way to address our building needs. We have 120 days from the MSBA acceptance to vote to fund this plan. So March 20th is the deadline. We do not get another bite at the apple. We do not get a chance to revamp the plan. We do not have the opportunity to come back with a different solution. This is what we have. If this plan goes down, we fall out of the line and we start over. Realistically, a no vote will push us even further back in line as the MSBA looks to work with towns ready to move forward. There is a statewide backlog for school buildings. It's huge. The MSBA will not want to invest time and effort into projects shown to be not supported by a town. Essentially, we'll be looking at least 10 years. More of concern, really, though, is if we vote no, we're going to be stuck with the facilities we have. We're going to be throwing piles of good money at bad facilities, and we'll be stuck with them as decades, because after we spend a bunch of money, we're going to want to get some value out of that money. People will say this proposed plan is too expensive, and surely it is not cheap, but it is the most fiscally sound option. People will say we should pass on the MSBA funds and ignore standards, risk loss of accreditation, and just make repairs as needed. But that's not a real option. There's no way to fix what we have without a major reconstruction, which will expose the asbestos in the floors, ceilings, heating system, and window glazing, which will require full abatement. We'll have the added expense of student relocation, temporary classrooms, and never-ending disruption that will only result in a temporary fix of one building at a much higher local cost than what we could spend and replace two buildings. People will say that we should just build a high school. We could, but then we would need to reopen TC Passios. We'd have to add those operating costs back to the town budget, plus millions more very quickly in capital repairs to keep TCP open. Again, this will be more expensive than building this new combined high school, middle school. Having the shared common areas of the middle school and high school saves millions in construction dollars and equipment costs, and creates economies of scale, not only in construction, but also in operating costs. People will say that, what about Turkey Hill Middle School? Will that need work? And eventually, yes, it will, probably in about 10 to 15 years. But that's going to be the case no matter what we do now. The good news is, Turkey Hill Middle School is in good shape for a almost 50-year-old building. Its design and construction are solid and adaptable and usable for years to come. The people that are saying they're looking out for the next shoe to drop, well, the next shoe to drop would be TCP, and we can eliminate that now. People will say, I don't have kids in the schools. Why should I have to pay? Well, by law and by practice, this is how we fund our community, this is how we fund our schools. I'd also ask these same folks, who paid for your schools? We have an obligation not only legally, but as a civic duty and morally to be sure current and future generations have the tools needed to thrive. That's what keeps our town and our country alive. People always say we can't afford this because the town manager has just projected operating budget deficits for the next 5 years. Well, we always have deficits as inflation exceeds 2.5% and state funding continues to lag. But these deficits, if you notice, are lower than they have been in previous years. Every year we balance what we could or should do versus what we can afford to do. That will never change. Funding this project will not add to the deficits as the funding is outside the operating budget. In fact, if we do not fund this project, the deficits will instead grow as repairs are added back to local capital planning and state funding is lost. Our reality in Lunenburg is overrides don't pass, and the only way to balance the budget is to increase productivity. The best way to increase productivity is improve facilities, tools, and equipment, and this project provides that. So with that, I invite people to please come to town meeting on Tuesday, January 7th, and please support this at the ballot on Saturday, January 11th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews, and certainly as one member of this board and one member of the community at large, I could not support your statement any stronger than I do. I think the people of the town and the town as a whole, not just the school department, not just people with children in the school, but the entire community has an opportunity to really embrace a fiscally responsible plan that is chock full of good value for the long term for this town. And in short order, we can look to spend $36 million and partner with the state, who will provide $36 million to get, as you said, a state-of-the-art building, combine 2 schools into one, not have to put another one online, avoid replacing TC Passios as a school, avoid any repairs on the high school, and all these repairs that are very well documented that would basically total in the tens of millions of dollars, sometimes purported to be about $30 million for renovations of existing buildings. This gives you a new building with practices and spaces that can accommodate everything we need for the foreseeable future, and it was all done with the MSBA and the school department and the school building committee, well thought out by many people, presented to the townspeople many times, and I hope as a town we can get behind this project and make the best use of the millions that we are going to spend one way or another and go with this plan, because I really believe it is the best plan for Lunenburg. So thank you, Mr. Matthews, for your statement and all for the work that you've done, and the whole school building committee and school department and everybody who's worked on this project for many years, the two regionalization committees. All of this has led to this point, and we do need people to come out on town meeting and certainly on the election day, that Saturday following.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Bertram.
I just want to say I agree with both of the statements and the comments that have been made, and I would encourage people not only to come to town meeting, but if you have questions or if you feel it doesn't make sense or you don't understand why we're going with this plan, there are mechanisms that you can reach out to the superintendent, you can reach out to the chair of the school building committee, there's a Facebook page that you can look into, but I would encourage you to reach out to the people that can answer the questions that you may have prior to town meeting so that you can go into town meeting educated and go into the ballot educated. Because the reality is that if we don't move forward with this school, it's going to be extremely short-sighted, and you may save money today, but in very short order, you're going to be putting more money out of your pocket to renovate buildings that don't meet the standards. And we're at risk for losing our accreditation, and our children are at risk. That's the reality. So I would encourage you, if you do have questions, to reach out to individuals, and they'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Toll.
I also support the statements made this evening, and particularly the statements made by Mrs. Bertram. I think if anyone questions the validity of this vote or this decision that the town has to make, it's imperative that they get those questions out in the open, get them answered, get the data they need to make an informed decision, and hopefully it's a decision that's in the best interest of the town.
Thank you.
Just one final note, the school building committee is going to be presenting to the finance committee. Actually, the finance committee is holding their public hearing for the special town meeting this Thursday. It'll be here, it'll be televised. So it's another opportunity to tune in or come on in and ask the questions you may have and get more data. And I'm sure the finance committee will be asking a number of financial questions, obviously, to make sure they, can support it as well. So it'll be a good opportunity to learn more.
Okay, announcements. Once again, at the risk of being way too repetitive, we're still looking for members to serve on the Public Access Cable Committee and the Personnel Committee. So if you're interested in either of those two, or if you don't know what you're interested in, but you want to provide services to the town, there are ways to learn on these committees on the fly, and we would encourage that as well. So getting people involved is really important, and those are two very important committees. There are others that have vacancies. I'm just concentrating on these two now because those are the most urgent need. So please fill the talent bank form out at either the town clerk's office, or you can download one from the town website. Okay, current business, review and approval of annual business licenses. This is the licenses we didn't do last week.
So we have a number of licenses up for review and approval this evening. We held all of our alcohol licenses last week, and we have a few other related to businesses. These were ones that we were either waiting for paperwork or some payment, or perhaps they just weren't completely ready last week. So I think we'll do the same thing that we did last week. We'll go by category, and there is one business that has 2 licenses for which we still have outstanding tax payments, and I'll talk about that separately. But first, we have our weekday entertainment licenses. Black Horse 2 doing business as RG Scooters, Inc., American Graffiti, and B&H Corporation doing business at Mickey Shea's.
And as I did last week, after the town manager finishes reading the categories, unless somebody has any comments about any of them, I will just entertain a motion.
Before you do that, I have one more. The Bootlegger Restaurant, 50 Massachusetts Ave, for a weekday entertainment license also.
Move that we approve?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
And then the next, we have one peddler's license for Scott T. Lowe doing business as Scott's Dogs, 579 Page Street.
Move that we approve?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
And one limousine license for First Choice Limousine and Transportation Service, 555 Chase Road.
Move to approve.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
And next, we have common victualler all alcohol licenses for American Graffiti, Inc., Asian Imperial, Inc., doing business as Asian Imperial Garden, RNDC Company, doing business as RG Scooters, Kissimmee Corporation, doing business as The Bootlegger, Red Pepper, Inc., doing business as Ixtapa Mexican Cantina, C. Flan, Inc., doing business as Sean Patrick's, B&H Corporation, doing business as Mickey Shea's, and Melendez Magana, doing business as Dario's.
Move that we approve?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Next, we have general on-premises all alcohol licenses being issued to 449 Corporation, doing business as Lakeview Club, Mary L. Padula, doing business as the Harley House, J.K. Waterfront, Inc., doing business as On the Rocks, Donald E. Lyons, doing business as Settlers Pub.
Motion to approve.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? None?
Next, we have one common victualler wine and malt beverages being issued to PP Group LLC doing business as Bangkok Hill.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None?
The next group is Retail Package Goods Store. Licenses being issued to Victory Distributors Incorporated doing business as Hannaford Food and Drug, Vasta Inc., and Elena's Gourmet Grocery Inc.
Move to approve?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None?
And then the last group is the Retail Package Goods Stores for wine and malt beverages. License being issued to Carol A. Baker and Henry A. Baker, doing business as Baker's Whalum Variety. Khan Muhadeen, doing business as Hadwin Park Market. Genghis Incorporated, doing business as Center Pizza and Variety. And Central Mass Garden Center. And Honey Farms Incorporated, doing business as Honey Farm Store Number 93.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None?
And we have one business that has both a common victualler all alcohol license and a weekday entertainment license, for which outstanding taxes have yet to be paid. For Donnelly's Tavern, 43 Summer Street. We did send a letter out to anybody who owed any taxes or fees to the town in November, letting them know what the amount was that they owed and that they needed to be in touch with the Treasurer Collector's Office. Today, I spoke with Mr. Donnelly, and he indicated that he was not able to pay today, but he would be able to pay on Monday, December 30th, and he understood that that was after the deadline. He asked the board for consideration given the number of years that his business has been in town. So I said I would pass that along to you, but that the board was very clear in its direction that you wanted to have taxes and fees paid before licenses were issued, that you were not going to issue conditional licenses.
That certainly was my position.
It's mine as well. I mean, we had this discussion, we started a few years tightening up on this, because it's not just about getting the money in, it's about the time and effort that goes into chasing down what used to be a few select establishments in town that needed repeated contacts, repeated efforts to get the money in, repeated efforts to get everything squared away. And, quite honestly, the town is not in the business of managing these businesses. And we do not have the staffing, the funding, or the interest in doing so. So, we set the ground rules. We had been doing it for a few years. Repeated history. I really am not interested in how long someone's been in business in town. I'm more interested in how well they maintain their licenses and their payments, et cetera. So personally, I have no interest in doing a conditional license.
Right, when we started this when this started about 4 years ago, we started tightening it up, and we made one last provisional, okay, we're going to do this, and we made it clear as a board we weren't going to do it anymore. We're talking about 12 days difference about when this customer wants to pay or this business owner wants to pay, and if my business relied on these licenses, I'd be sure to get it in time, and we made it clear over years. This wasn't last week we just came out with this. And it's unfair to all the other people if we would do it, because we're asking them to pay on time, and as we saw, everybody except one paid on time. So I'm not interested in signing a provisional license and this license can be approved, I would encourage him to bring in his payment, so not let the license lapse, the renewal lapse. I would encourage him to pay before the end of the year, but we're not going to sign it until the next meeting, which is January 7th, which is before the annual town meeting. We can sign it. Unless there's anybody else who has anything else. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. I don't have an issue with that. I think we've made it very clear, but I just want to understand the mechanisms of how this will work. If he submits the paperwork and the payment prior to the date of his expiration, because he doesn't have a new license, the business will remain closed until he has the new signed license. Is that correct?
Well, the business doesn't necessarily have to remain closed, but the activities that are permitted through these licenses can occur.
The alcohol.
The alcohol, the weekday entertainment. I mean, I think in theory it'd be pretty tough to be open.
Common vic too,
The
right?
common vic,
So
right?
he's-
The common vic, he can't be open, correct?
Right.
He has to have a common
Yeah,
vic.
so essentially that's what would happen, yeah. And he did ask me when the first meeting was in January. So he is aware of that.
Okay, IMA with Townsend, Town of Townsend, for the sale of net metering credits.
So I am still awaiting some information so that I am able to answer the questions that Selectwoman Bertram raised at the last meeting. There's some information that needs to come from Unitil before I can have a question answered by Town Council. So we're going to have to continue to keep that on hold.
And it is before Unitil, that question.
That question is before
Okay.
Unitil, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, and am I correct in assuming that Townsend has not signed it because they're waiting for us to sign it? Is that correct?
Townsend actually did sign.
Okay.
They did sign, yeah.
What it is?
I'd rather not.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so we will wait for that until we hear back from Unitil. Amend the surrounding communities agreement with the Cordish Company.
So several weeks ago, you entered into a surrounding community agreement with the Cordish Company. The Cordish Company is the proposed developer of the Slots Parlor over in Leominster. That company is one of 3 that are applying for one license statewide. That license application is in front of the Gaming Commission. I think they're supposed to be making a decision by the end of the calendar year, although I'm not quite sure that that's happening. But you will recall that Lunenburg, Lancaster, Townsend, and Westminster entered into surrounding community agreements in October with this developer. And the towns of Bolton, Sterling, and the city of Fitchburg did not enter into surrounding community agreements, but chose to petition the Gaming Commission to secure surrounding community status. The Gaming Commission met and reviewed the petitions of those 3 communities and granted surrounding community status to the town of Bolton, but declined to grant surrounding community status to the city of Fitchburg and the town of Sterling. So for the town of Bolton, that means the next step for the developer in the town is to enter into a surrounding community agreement. The developer has proposed a surrounding community agreement to the town of Bolton, which the town of Bolton, I understand, is interested in accepting. But the problem with it is our agreement says that we have, as our attorney says, most favored nation status. So that means that the developer can't enter into an agreement with another community that gives them more preference, gives them better benefits than what we are getting in our agreement, except for the town of Lancaster, which we had previously agreed to. So the issue is the town of Bolton. I think I'm just going to read this paragraph because I think it summarizes it well. The amendment being sought to accommodate a settlement with the town of Bolton, As you know, there is a provision in our current agreement which prevents a Cordish company from entering into a surrounding community agreement with any other municipality that provides more benefit than what the town of Lunenburg will receive, with the exception of Lancaster. The agreement negotiated with Bolton provides the town of Bolton with an annual fee of $35,000 per year. You will recall that we receive an annual payment of $5,000 per year in our agreement. The traffic impacts to the town of Bolton via Route 117 will be significant, which is what they demonstrated to the Gaming Commission, and which is why their petition was successful when the other communities weren't. So we attempted to negotiate a higher annual payment with Cordish, but were unsuccessful. But the Cordish company did offer to provide a one-time payment to the town of Lunenburg in the amount of $35,000, and still the $5,000 per year, and we would still have surrounding community status. So that's how this document has been amended. So they're looking for us to accept that the town of Bolton will receive a higher benefit than we will, so that the exceptions to the agreement will be Lancaster and Bolton in exchange for a one-time payment of $35,000. Council has indicated that this needs to be, if the board is inclined to do this, it needs to be agreed to this evening, because we're coming to the end of the time period to get this information back to the Gaming Commission.
Hearing or reading what town council said, I think it's a fair deal. It certainly meets the clause of not another town not getting a better deal, and we're going to be matching that. I think that the idea of getting higher annual payments was discussed, at least proposed by our attorney, and Cordish and their representative was not interested in hearing that at all. They weren't even going to entertain that. So that would put us behind, I think, getting, again, as we said, when we signed the original agreement, being a surrounding community is going to open up avenues should we be impacted more than we believe we might, or Cordish believes we might, both, by giving us access to a fund that the Gaming Commission will have control over for these very things. If things happen that are unforeseen to towns, and it's more important getting that, and I think the $35,000 one-time payment is, from my standpoint and for me, is fine with me.
I would agree.
I just want to comment, I'm willing to sign this tonight. However, I do have some concerns. I mean, I believe, and I guess I have some questions. I believe we've missed the deadline for filing for surrounding community status because we had entered into the agreement prior. Correct? So we can't now, should we not execute this agreement, it's too late to try to file for a surrounding community status.
No,
Well, it's too late to file a petition
Yeah?
for surrounding community status, but we have an existing
right.
agreement for surrounding community status,
Okay.
which we're not going to lose.
Right.
We're not going to lose that.
Okay. I mean, my only concern is, the clause was that no community could receive a benefit higher than Lunenburg. And the reality is that Bolton has. I mean, I understand the impacts may be different, but a $35,000 annual payment versus a one-time payment is obviously of higher value than, so the clause that we have in our agreement, really, my concern is that if they reach another agreement with another community, and then they say, well, no, we're not going to honor that, I mean, I would wonder why they executed the agreement in the first place, because it really does fly in the face of the original agreement.
What I think that the attorney has said is that if we didn't accept this, then they would go to arbitration.
Right.
And it wouldn't be, our ability to change ours would be negated. We wouldn't have that ability because then their agreement would be not something they voluntarily signed. It would be something that was arbitrated, and our clause wouldn't kick in.
Right. So that they would go to arbitration with Bolton.
Right.
Okay.
They would be forced into an agreement with arbitration, so therefore our clause, which says that Cordish can't voluntarily sign another surrounding community agreement that's better than ours. So they're asking us, they want to sign with Bolton, but in order to do that, because of our clause, they have to do something for us. If we don't do this, then they'll just say, they'll just go to arbitration.
And I think the reality is that $35,000 annual payment to the town of Bolton, that was what the town of Bolton demonstrated as its added costs. They did a traffic study, and I talked to the town administrator over there. You know, they presented data on how many additional traffic stops they had to have, they would have as a result of this. So they came up with that $35,000. So I think if we didn't sign the agreement and they had to go to arbitration with Bolton, I think Bolton would get $35,000 because they've essentially demonstrated that to the Gaming Commission as well. This is sort of a way for us to voluntarily accept that Bolton will get that, and we'd get a one-time payment of $35,000 that we wouldn't otherwise get. And I think now, I mean, we're really at the end of the process where, because Fitchburg and Sterling their petitions weren't accepted, the developer is under no obligation to enter into a surrounding community agreement with either of those communities, although the developer has said that they would, but they certainly aren't going to give them, we wouldn't be in the same position. They're not going to give them a better deal than what we have because they can't.
Okay. And there are no other communities outstanding at this point? I mean, that's correct?
There aren't. We're just,
Okay.
everybody who was coming to the table has already come to the table.
Okay.
Do we have the document?
I do.
Okay.
I do, yeah.
So do I have a motion on this amendment to the surrounding communities agreement with the Cordish Company?
I move that we accept the modification to the agreement as written.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Minutes.
Okay, so there are 3 sets of minutes in here, including minutes from June 12, 2012, which you actually approved on July 10th of 2012, but we didn't have a signed copy in our folder, and the town clerk doesn't have them on the website.
Warrants. Accounts payable in the amount of $708,655.67. Payroll warrant in the amount of $709,894.92. And a payroll deduction warrant in the amount of $283,689.62.
That's why I'm looking.
Yeah. Interesting one to lose. Yeah.
Any action file issues? None. Committee reports. Board of Health. Bob is not here. Building reuse.
No report.
Capital Planning Committee.
We'll meet tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to present our prioritization to the town manager.
Okay.
I sent a bunch of questions to Marion.
Yeah,
I
okay.
did, yeah.
And I just want to ask, did we, maybe I missed it, was the list of all of the requests circulated to us?
It wasn't. I didn't realize that wasn't put together, and I was actually doing that this afternoon to prepare for my meeting tomorrow, so.
Okay, because I'd like the list of what was requested from everyone,
Yeah.
so then I can compare that to what is the priority list that the capital
Well-
planning committee
Well-
puts together.
Go ahead.
If I might, we prioritized everything on the list.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Whether it makes the cut or not is kind of up for
Yeah.
discussion, but
Okay.
we took all the requests and prioritized them 1 through 25 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the question I answered was about, thought you were asking about the out years, the other 4 years, which we usually do a spreadsheet that shows all 5 years and provide copies of everything for all 5 years, which we
That
did
would be
not do.
helpful,
Yeah,
sure.
that would
And
be-
we were given that data, so it's,
One thing I think, only because unofficially the town manager in the 5-year forecast showed what will, assuming there are no changes tomorrow, will be the official copy. I think we have to establish, or at least have a dialogue about establishing a policy for, we have one for a minimum, like what qualifies as a capital purchase, and that's anything $10,000 or over. We really have to decide what we can do within the budget and what, by its very nature of lifetime and cost, needs to be borrowed for. Because I think what we are seeing, certainly in the prioritization, is that an item is basically taking the whole capital budget. That if that item wasn't there and we borrowed for it, everything else behind it could be afforded. And the item that we're talking about has a long, has a lifespan, and it has a decent lifespan to really qualify it, in my mind. And I don't want to speak for the town manager, but she has mentioned it in the past that there are some things that you really should borrow for and not pay out of the operating budget for capital planning. So I think we should work with the capital planning committee to establish that kind of policy. Finance committee.
Yes, as mentioned, the Finance Committee meets this Thursday, the 19th, and part of that meeting is a public hearing on the special town meeting warrant.
Library Board of Trustees, Bob is not here. MPO,
No report.
Planning Board.
I think it's going to be redundant because I missed last week's meeting, so I don't know if Mr. Matthews provided an update or if all of you have seen
I
it
didn't,
in
no.
the paper. But basically, the meeting focused on the new village bylaw that the planning board is working on. Montechusett Regional Planning Commission came in and did a presentation. A lot of the work was delineating what the village boundaries would be, where that district would be established. MRPC had put together a draft bylaw that the planning board went through, and it was a very long process, arduous process of going through what uses would be allowed by right. The main focus is to allow mixed uses versus right now our bylaw prohibits that. So for example, you could have a business with an apartment upstairs, which right now by our bylaw doesn't allow. But they're really looking at a mixed use and trying to go through and find out what uses are going to be allowed and what aren't. Originally, the school building, all the school property was in the district, and after discussion, the consensus was to take it out of the district and to look at instead eventually coming up with a building reuse bylaw, which would be municipal buildings that are repurposed and having a bylaw for those. MRPC did provide a couple of sample bylaws for that the planning board is reviewing. And they're hopeful that they're going to be bringing both of these to town meeting in May. So they are working on them. As an individual, not as a member of this board, I did express some concern with the TCP not being in the village district because I want it to be easy to repurpose that building should that become a reality. So, that was just comments that I made as an individual. And then there was a discussion on the school itself. Nathan Lockwood had asked the planning board to vote to support the project. And there was some discussion, and Mr. Matthews provided some great insight into the project. Ultimately, they voted 3-2 to support the project. And then I left the meeting, Mr. Matthews stayed, and I don't know if anything of interest happened after that.
Not really.
Okay, so that was the gist of that meeting.
No offense to the planning board.
I don't know if either of you can speak to it, but can you, or want to speak to it, so I'll just offer it, because people may be listening here. This board obviously voted unanimously, as did the school building committee and as the school committee. Was there any indication from the two no votes what their objections to the project are?
Do you want to speak to it?
One gentleman was concerned that, the cost of the taxpayers and the challenge in finding affordable housing in town. And he felt that instead that we should forego the state money and instead just do it all ourselves, do it not to, the current specs or expectations of the MSBA, not to worry about accreditation, not to worry about any of those things, and instead just kind of go it on our own and have a ongoing, never-ending renovation project going on at the high school as we try to educate the kids and as we somehow shield them from asbestos and debris and find a place to educate them as we go through it. The other gentleman felt that, people move to town and expect these buildings and they move away. And as a lifelong Lunenburg resident, he didn't think it was something that people should be responsible for. Or maybe just people who have kids in school should pay for these things. Which, I have a lot of opinions about that. But those were the reasons given.
Okay.
And just I just want to add that the first individual, I think he believes, and obviously it's open to interpretation, but my understanding was that he believes that the high school can be renovated and can meet the standards, and that that we can, and he also indicated that we can go back with a different plan, and both Mr. Matthews and I outlined how difficult that is going to be. It's not just a simple, well, we didn't vote this plan, but we can go back and change the plan, and that there's a long, arduous process to get through, and that's not an option. But his thought was that the building is in decent shape and can be renovated. So, and we tried to outline the concerns that we have about, we're going to have kids in the school, you can't just renovate the school, and we're going to get into building codes and safety concerns, and we did try to have a dialogue, but the bottom line is that those two individuals felt that it wasn't, they were not in favor of it.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that if we're going to announce it here, I think it's important for
Well, it
people
was
to
in
hear.
the paper, so it
Well,
was...
I mean,
it
but we're
just-
talking about it here, and so
Yeah.
if people hadn't heard, I think it would be good to know what their reasoning was.
Right.
Was that the end of the planning board?
Yeah.
Okay. PAC, Bob is on here, school committee.
School committee, actually, I should have reported last week, their last meeting, they were starting the budget process, the non-personnel budget, supplies, books, that type of thing, in each of the principals presented to the school committee, and technology presented as well. And actually, tomorrow night they're meeting, and they're going to be, one of the items on the agenda is voting to basically support the findings of the Building Reuse Committee, and if the middle school, high school is approved at town meeting, voting the TC Passios and the Brooks House as surplus. Again, that's pending a positive vote for the project, because of course, if the project is not passed, we'll have to reopen, perhaps both. But again, the effort is to try to just, keep forward movement. We don't want to relive what we had last time we had some buildings in town where we didn't have a plan in place, and make sure it's very clear that those buildings will come back to the community. And again, if we follow the suggestions, recommendations of the reuse committee, we have an opportunity to see some redevelopment there. We often talk about wanting a village center. We talk about having more commercial businesses in town, different tax revenue than from the residents, and if you want a vital downtown area for what we have, it's not going to happen if all you have is town-owned buildings, schools, and churches. So this is a great opportunity to move in that direction. So that's something they'll be talking about tomorrow.
Okay, and School Building Committee.
Again, we'll be presenting Thursday night to the Finance Committee. Invite everyone down to ask any questions, clarify anything, and we are preparing for town meeting and the ballot.
Excellent. Sewer Commission, Bob's not here, and there's no report on the mass broadband. Town manager reports or department reports?
I have none.
You have none. No appointments, reappointments, or resignations, no executive session. This is, as I said earlier, our last selectmen meeting before the new year. Our next meeting will be just prior to the special town meeting, which is on January 7th. So town meeting is that night, but we will have a short meeting at the high school, usually in the cafeteria beforehand. Any parting words this year from the board?
See you next year.
I'll take the opportunity and ask everyone to have a very Merry Christmas and have a safe, healthy, and thereby happy New Year. Please come out to the FinCom meeting, public hearing this Thursday, and certainly to the special town meeting on January 7th at the high school at the high school auditorium, 7 p.m. And then, of course, the ballot question on Saturday, January 11th, 2014. Till then, we will sign off and see you in 2014. Good night.
Good night.